You know, we've all heard the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. It's one of the most famous miracles, right? But what if there's more to it than just a miracle? What if it's actually a masterclass on faith, broken down into 4 really distinct lessons? Well, according to our source material, that's exactly what it is. So let's dive in and break it down.
Okay, so first, let's set the scene. You've got Jesus and his disciples trying to get away for a bit, but this massive crowd, we're talking thousands of people, follows them out into the middle of nowhere. They're miles from any town, they've been listening for days, and now they're starving. There's literally no food. It's a logistical nightmare and, as we'll see, the perfect setup for a test.
And this really sets up the central question for this whole explainer. When you are staring down a problem that just seems completely and utterly impossible, what's your gut reaction? Because in this story, we're about to see a few very different responses, and they reveal pretty much everything about what faith looks like under pressure.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. Jesus sees this huge, hungry crowd not just as a crisis to be managed, but as a classroom. The source material makes it clear. He's intentionally using this impossible situation almost like a pop quiz for his disciples. It's designed specifically to test their faith and hopefully to strengthen it.
And this verse just lays it all out, doesn't it? Look at that last line. And this he said to prove him. That word prove there, it means to test. So Jesus already had the whole thing figured out. He wasn't asking Philip for ideas. He was asking to see what was really going on in Philip's heart and to check the quality of his faith.
All right, so let's see how this test actually plays out. The disciples give 2 really different answers to Jesus' question, and our source text frames them as the first 2 big lessons of the day. We're looking at 2 distinct flavors of doubt, 2 types of faith that are equally, well, inadequate.
So the first type is what the source calls a pessimistic faith. This is the kind of faith that gets completely overwhelmed by the size of the problem right away. It just fixates on everything that's missing, on all the reasons it can't be done, and it forgets to even factor God into the equation. In a word, it's hopeless.
And Philip is the perfect example of this. His answer is all about the bottom line, the logistics, the limitations. A denarius was basically a day's wage for a laborer, so he's saying that even with more than half a year's salary, they couldn't buy enough for everyone to get even a tiny bite. He does the math, sees it's impossible, and that's where his thinking stops. The problem just completely swamps his faith.
Now, the second type of faith we see is a little bit better, but it still falls short. The source calls this a questioning faith. This person doesn't just throw their hands up in despair. They actually get up and start looking for a solution. They try to do something. The problem is, even when they find something, they immediately doubt it's going to be enough.
And this is Andrew. He's way more proactive than Philip, right? He gets out there, he searches the crowd, and he finds a kid who's willing to share his lunch. He actually brings a resource to Jesus. That's the good part. But then he immediately kills the momentum with that question. But what are they among so many? He finds a potential answer, but instantly questions if it's powerful enough to matter.
So let's just put these 2 side by side for a second. Philip's pessimistic faith is totally paralyzed by the lack of resources. Andrew's questioning faith is an improvement. At least it acts, but it's still held back by the littleness of the resources. See the difference? One focuses on total absence, the other on insufficiency. And in the end, both of them fail the test of just trusting completely.
So if the disciples' responses were the wrong answers, what does the right answer look like? Well, the source presents Jesus himself as the third and most important lesson. He basically models the perfect, positive, unswerving faith that is the answer key to his own test.
And what's amazing is how simple Jesus' model of faith is. It's a really clear 4-step process. First, he takes what's there, no matter how small it seems. Second, he gives thanks for it, which totally shifts the focus from scarcity to gratitude. Third, he gives it away, just trusting God to do the rest. And fourth, he gets others involved, turning them from spectators into participants in the miracle.
And here it is, the crucial point. Jesus' whole perspective was radically different from his disciples. They saw a tiny lunch and a giant crowd. He saw a tiny lunch and an all-powerful God. He shifted the focus from the problem to the provider. And that is the very essence of unswerving faith.
So what happens when you have that kind of faith? Well, the result isn't just enough. It's overwhelming abundance. The crowd doesn't just get a little taste like Philip was worried about. No, they all eat until they are completely full.
But wait, the miracle isn't even over yet. After everyone has eaten their fill, Jesus tells the disciples, hey, go gather up the leftovers so nothing is wasted. And what they collect is just staggering. 12 full baskets.
And this detail is so important. 12 disciples, 12 baskets. According to our source, this is a direct, tangible lesson for them. God didn't just meet the need of the massive crowd, He provided an over-the-top abundance, a personal takeaway for each and every servant who obediently played a part in the work. It's this powerful symbol of God's incredible generosity. Okay, now we get to the final lesson from this whole event, and this one is all about the crowd. They saw this unbelievable miracle happen right in front of them, but their response shows us a fourth and honestly a very dangerous kind of faith, a materialistic faith.
Now, on the surface, the reaction looks pretty good, right? They see the miracle and they correctly identify Jesus as the Messiah, that great prophet they've been waiting for. It sounds like a solid confession of faith, doesn't it?
But their understanding was tragically flawed. See, they weren't looking for a spiritual savior to deal with their sin. They wanted a materialistic king. They saw Jesus as their ticket to a life of free food, instant healing, and, finally kicking out their political enemies. Their so-called faith was completely focused on earthly, worldly satisfaction.
And Jesus just calls him out on it, straight up. He basically says, look, you're not following me because you understood the spiritual sign of the miracle. You're following me because you got a free lunch. He totally exposes the fact that their motivation was all about physical comfort, not spiritual truth.
So the source really hammers home the dangers of this mindset. Materialistic faith is, at its core, self-centered. It's about what I can get from God. It treats God like some cosmic vending machine for blessings. And it completely misses the whole point, that Jesus came not just to fill our stomachs for a day, but to be the spiritual bread of life that satisfies our souls forever.
And that really brings us to the clear conclusion of this whole analysis. The feeding of the 5,000 is so much more than a story about a meal. It is a brilliant masterclass, perfectly designed to test and reveal the quality of our faith, forcing us to ask what, or maybe who, we are really truly trusting in.
Which leaves all of us with this one final question to chew on. When we face our own impossible situations, is our faith ultimately about getting God to fix our problems for us? Or is it about trusting the character and power of God Himself no matter what the outcome is? Because the answer to that, well, it reveals everything.